Hello, I'm Kim Hood and welcome to Hood Made. In today's episode, I am decorating my house for Christmas and finding myself in need of some additional decor to kind of fill in some gaps, so to speak. So I have some thrifted charger plates that I am going to convert into some decor using some IOD transfers. I have some supplement jars that I am going to convert into some Christmas decor using some paint and again some IOD transfers and some crackle effect. And I have a cutting board that is in very bad repair that I thrifted for a few dollars. I'm going to sand it down and make some background type decor with that. Again, using a paint inlay, crackle paint, and some additional paint supplies to embellish it a little bit further. And lastly, I got an old shutter door that I've cut in half, and I'm going to make it a snowman for my front porch. So stay tuned. So in this first project, we're going to deck the walls with some charger plates using some IOD transfers. This is the Winter Botanist. This is this year's collection, and I'm going to use this particular design. Now, this design does not fit directly onto the charger plate, so I am going to cut it up. I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to clean the plate first with some alcohol, and I'm using this wording for the central part of the plate. Putting that down using the transfers, and then I'm going to cut this design up to curve it around the plate. And that is the thing about IOD transfers, is you don't have to use the pattern as it is laid out. You can take it apart, use it in different ways to fit whatever project you're working on. And you can fill in any spaces with other parts of it. And it simply is just a trial and error kind of situation where you're looking at how's it going to fit. I cut the slits that you see there to make it fit on that curved edge a little bit easier, so that when I begin to do the transfer with my transfer stick, it will kind of hang over the edge of the plate. And every time I lay my transfer down after I remove the plastic, I will burnish it either with the plastic or with just using my fingers. I didn't like the edge there, it looked a little too cut, so I'm going to put some leaves over it to make it look a little more organic. I'm going to put a little butterfly up at the top to fill in a little extra space. Now I'm going to take the gold charger plate and use the transfer clementine from Iron Orchids. I liked this particular design. I'm just going to fussy cut a little bit around it just so it'll fit a little easier. And of course, this is much easier if it does fit on the project without having to cut it up. Now we're going to be crocking around the Christmas tree using some supplement bottles. I'm going to use the supplement bottles to make little crocks to put our bottle brush trees in. These are supplement crocks that came from the wellness company. I'm cleaning them out here with my alcohol solution that I make. I'm going to take my plastic scraper to remove the extra paper along the edge, and then to peel the labels off of the bottles. The heat gun helps to make it easier to peel the labels off without leaving much residue behind. However, I did have to use some goof off to remove that. Once that was done, I'm going to use the primer from Paint Couture to put on the glass so that whatever paint I decide to use will stick a little bit easier. I'm going to dry them between coats with my heat gun. And once these are painted, I'm going to use DIY crackle finish to put on the bottles next. I'm sorry, it's Dixie Belle crackle finish. This is almost a clear glue-like consistency. When you put it on, it's a little bit slimy and sticky. And you want to make sure it's good and dry before you actually paint over this. So I'm using my heat gun, and then I'm going to use the Waverly chalk paint in plaster to paint over the crackle finish, and it immediately begins to crackle. Now the thing about it is, when you paint over the crackle finish, you want to not go over it over and over and over again, so just one coat. Once my chalk paint dried, I did take them outside and seal these with a polyacrylic sealer. You do not want to put transfers on painted surfaces that are not sealed. So whenever you use a chalk paint, a mineral paint, you need to seal them. And this is a close-up of the crackle finish, which turned out nicely. And I'm going to use the traditional POTS transfer to put the designs on the crocks. I will trim them up so that they will appear on the crock in a manner that looks like it was made for the crock. Transfers are a nice way to flip thrifted items or trash to treasure type items. Nice, quick, and easy. And I'm just going to piece those little edges I cut off earlier out a little bit so that it hangs over the wording. Here's a close-up. I'm going to put an angel on this crock. Here's a close-up. I'm going to need to cut the ends off so this fits a little bit better. And then I'm going to attach the ends a little bit further up so it looks like the piece is all one consistently long piece. I don't waste my IOD transfer pictures. Now I'm going to use DIY's dark wax and antique these a little bit. I know that I've already sealed the crocks prior to putting the transfers on, but I want them to look a little antique. The good news is that because it is sealed and I wipe it back, it doesn't, I can wipe it back a little bit easier. It doesn't make the crock too dark. And then I'm going to cover up the edge of the crock where the lid went with some black velvet ribbon. And then I'll make a cute little black velvet finger bows to go on each one of these. And I'm going to do this for all 3 pots. And these are glass jar pots or glass jar bottles. I think that if you're going to flip a supplement bottle, the glass jar ones are nicer, especially if you're going to put like foliage in them. They are heavier so they don't tip over. And this is my little finger bow. And again, I've made 3 of these, and I'm just gonna glue those to the area where the velvet ribbon comes together so it hides that seam. Now I'm going to need to cut these bottoms off of my trees. They didn't fit quite as well with them on. Now, of course, you could use them to glue them into the bottles if you wanted to do it that way. However, since the crocks are not Christmas, I can use them for other times of the year. Now, let's use the cutting board to make some cutting board decor. And I'm going to use this paint inlay from 12th Night by IOD. And I have already sanded down my board and I'm cleaning it, and I'm going to use the Paint Couture primer on this. If I have a piece that could potentially have bleeding into my paint or just be where it just soaks up too much paint, I will prime it using that primer. Now this is a DIY cottage core paint. It does have a primer and sealer built into it, but again, I just primed it for extra precaution. And I'm going to cut out the paint inlay because I want to kind of mark off where I'm going to have it in the middle of the board. I'm going to take a pencil and go around it in a moment. Now, before I did that, I started to lay down the crackle medium, and I was just going to leave it around there, but then I thought, let me just take this pencil and outline it, and it'll make it easier for me to paint the crackle medium around where I'm going to have the design. I don't really want the crackle finish beneath the paint inlay. I'm going to use my heat gun to get it dried, and once that's dried, I'm going to use Fusion's paint. I believe this is Acadia Pear, and I'm going to paint over the entire board. You're going to be able to see where the crackle finish is and where it's not in just a moment here. So you can see in the middle it doesn't crackle, but everywhere else it does. And again, try not to go over your crackle finish with your paint more than once. Now this is the paint inlay that I'm putting it down on top of wet paint. I'm using some water to work it into the paint and brushing back any extra excess. And I'm using some of the paint to fill in the areas. I'm using my heat gun to dry it, and you're going to see it all of a sudden disappear. So it doesn't even look like there's a paint inlay on there. I will use some water to wet it again after it has dried. So a couple hours have gone by, it has dried, and I'm wetting it again, and I'm going to pull up the paper, and it's going to leave the paint design behind. It's never perfect. It always looks like it's old or has been distressed. Now, I'm using my white paint to go back in because along the edge of the design. I'm putting this base coat down, then I'll put my crackle finish over it and then use the green paint to get crackle closer to the inner part of the design along the edges. So I'm taking the green paint, and as I'm painting it, I'm getting the crackle finish closer to the design. Using my heat gun to dry it quicker, so I don't have to wait. Now, once I complete this and it's dried, I will take it outside and spray it with a polyacrylic spray. And now it's already been sealed with my polyacrylic sealer. I'm going to take some of the DIY dark wax and just make it a little bit darker. It wipes off really well, doesn't leave too much darkness behind. And now I'm going to use Rub and Buff Antique Gold, and I'm going to go into the groove using my finger to kind of rub that in. I'm going to take some black chalk paint and go along the edges. Just again to make the edges pop and to add a little bit more distressing. I'm going to do it along the edges, along the edge of the gold that I've laid down, and then along the edge of the handle. If it gets a little too much, like if there's too much paint that's laid down, this wipes back very easily. You can use a wet paper towel. This is a wet shop towel that I have. You can also use baby wipes. I'm going to take my Rub and Buff and go on the edges of my cutting board. And if I get too much Rub and Buff on and I want to wipe it back, it's easy to do with a little bit of alcohol on my shop towel. And then I'm going to take this dark wax and I'm going to go over the gold just to tone it down a little bit. It was too bright. And here is the finished product. And y'all, this is going to be my favorite one. I'm dreaming of a white shutter snowman. So I am going to take these shutter doors that I'm standing in front of here and cut them in half. And here are my two halves. I will clean one of them really well with my alcohol wipe or my alcohol wash, and I'm going to put a plastic bag over the lower part because I'm going to spray paint this upper part black for the hat. So that I'm using some painter's tape to fix the plastic bag over my shutter. And I put this piece of board underneath so I wouldn't get my spray paint on my table. I'm using some satin Rust-Oleum black. And I have a piece of wood that I'm going to use for the brim, and I'm also going to paint it black. I thought I pressed record when I made this, but I did not. So this is a spindle that I've cut in half long ways. Chopped up a little bit, sanded to a point, used this Fusion Tuscan Orange to paint it to look like a carrot, and then I used a DIY's Dark and Decrepit to put in those dark areas. I'm going to take some silver bells, I'm going to spray paint them black. Here they are. Now these won't lay down flat because they have a piece on the back that needs to be flattened, and so I'm taking some needle nose pliers and I'm just pushing it in and then using the edge of the pliers to flatten it out so this bell will sit flush against the front of my snowman. This is a piece of fabric that I'm going to use for a scarf, and I'm using my glue gun essentially to hem it so it has a nice edge. This is the piece of wood I'm going to use for the brim. I'm going to use some E6000 on each side. With hot glue. So the E6000 will keep it held while the hot glue holds it in place while the E6000 dries. I found some black buttons, E6000 and hot glue. I'm going to put those on for the eyes. E6000 and hot glue to put my carrot nose on, made out of my spindle. Here is the scarf. I'm going to again, this is just going to take some hot glue here. I didn't use E6000 on the scarf. I'm going to wrap it around, turn it over, make sure that it is fixed to the back. And this is going to lean up against the wall, so nobody should be looking back behind my snowman. If they are, I need to ask them why and what they're doing. Okay, now I need to use a piece also to make the knot of the scarf. I'm going to glue it in place, trim the edges, and twist it over so you can't see the raw edges. So now it looks like a nice little knot. This is some leftover fabric. I'm going to cut it in half, and I'm going to make two pieces for the tails of the scarf. One's going to be longer than the other. I'm going to bunch it up at the top, kind of glue it in place. I'll wrap a little piece of fabric around it to hold the pleating in place. I'm going to do both of the tails that way. And I'm just kind of seeing how that looks, and you can kind of see how I'm playing around with how I want them to be positioned back behind the knot. So I'm going to glue the tails on behind the knot. And once that's in place, I will dovetail the ends. Now let's put the black painted bells on for my snowman's buttons. Again, E6000 for the long-term hold, hot glue for the short-term hold. Now I want to make some florals to go in my snowman's hat, and I've just got some berries, some pine cones, and a greenery stem. I'm going to put them together. I'm going to trim the ends of them off with my 10 snips, and then I'll use a piece of that I just trimmed to wrap around the end to hold it together. And then I'm just going to shove that in the brim. There's a space between the brim and the shutter that it fits nicely into. And then I'm going to take some white chalk paint and just kind of frost it like there's a little bit of snow on the berries, the leaves, and the pine cones, and then along the brim of the hat. I also did this at the top, which I didn't show here, and you can put as much on as you want. Now here are my final projects. Here's my snowman. I think he turned out very cute. And as a matter of fact, my mother came to visit and he went home with her. A close-up of the crocks holding the bottle brush trees, and you can see I can change those little bottle brush trees out for other greenery later in the year or early in the new year. So this would be cute for spring, fall, even summertime flowers or greenery could go in here. The close-up of the cutting board, I'm going to use this as a background on shelves to put decor in front of. I'm going to give you a close-up of how it crackled, the distressing, and the gold ribbon buff. And then here are my plates. This one is super simple. Of course, if you wanted to put a bow on it or even greenery around it, I will probably hang these on my kitchen wall between the cabinets, the upper and lower cabinets. For decor, I don't have black backsplashes, so I usually hang decor up that's seasonal, and I'll use them in that way. Of course, you could use them as shelf sitters. Y'all, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I've been very blessed by the fact that y'all want to even watch my videos. I have gone to over 1,000 subscribers in around a 2-month time frame, and I am very grateful. Please do like and subscribe and share, and I will see y'all again in the next video.